Hello, this is Tim Congdon. I'm chairman of the Institute of International Monetary Research at the University of Buckingham. This is the introduction to a four-part lecture series about how money and banking affect the economy. It's a series based on my own rather longer lecture course in the MSc in Money, Banking and Central Banking that I give at the University of Buckingham. Now, one of the strange things about economics is that there isn't really much attention nowadays in most macroeconomic theories to how money and banking affect things. In fact, in many of these treatments, textbook treatments and so on, money and banking are a scant afterthought. That's quite startling, because if you look at the historical record, you'll see that since the start of the 20th century, practically all recessions have been caused by a tightening of monetary policy, and indeed, arguably, that's true going back even to the 18th century. So we need to think a bit about what's going on here, and in any discussion about money and banking, we need to think about a book that was published in 1963 on a monetary history of the United States by Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz. This is a classic work which disputed the then well-established orthodoxy that the Great Depression of 1929 to 33, huge disaster that was, had been caused by a failure of capitalism. What Friedman and Schwartz showed was that there had been a almost 40% fall in the quantity of money between late 1929 and early 1933, and they blamed this on the American Federal Reserve, the American Central Bank. The Federal Reserve was not part of the private sector. It was, on the contrary, a government-supported bureaucracy created by legislation. Hadn't existed before 1913. And so the Great Depression wasn't caused by something wrong with capitalism, it was caused by a collapse in the quantity of money related, of course, to what was going on inside the banking system. So we need to think very hard about how money and banking affect the economy. This is a really basic subject. Why is it that economists have neglected this subject? There may be a kind of nagging aversion to it because it's tied up with the hostility, the dislike of paying interest of the financial sector that goes back even to the ancient Greeks. Both Plato and Aristotle disapproved of usury, the paying of interest on loans. In this lecture, in this series of four lectures given by Andrew Dowie, I'll just go through the topics one by one. In the first lecture, we have the main components and the key concepts of monetary analysis as developed in Milton Friedman's work, beginning of not just in 1963 with that book, but also in 1956 with a famous article called A Restatement of the Quantity Theory of Money. In the second lecture, there's a discussion of how two sort of flows of transactions interact. There are transactions in current things, if you like, things going on with I receive income, I spend the income, the expenditure goes on output, and then the output is created in factories and offices and so on, and that goes income. which is spent, and so you have a kind of what Keynes, famous economist who wrote the General Theory in 1936, he said this is the industrial circulation, or the income expenditure circular flow. But there's also what he called the financial circulation, where investors buy and sell stocks and shares, buy and sell other assets as well. And many economists think these two flows, these two circular flows as they call them, are distinct and separate. But they're not. We can sell some shares to pay for holiday. We can sell a house and use the proceeds to buy a car. So there's a relationship between the financial and industrial circulations, and in my view, which is very controversial, it is these leakages between the two circulations reflecting asset price movements that are critical to the fluctuations in economic activity that we see in capitalist economies. The third lecture is about the process that keeps money and spending together. It's sometimes called the real balance effect. It's a complicated idea. You need to listen to the lecture that Mr. Dowie gives. It's also called sometimes the hot potato argument, the Bigot effect, the Wicksell process. It's a critical set of ideas. Then in the final lecture, there's a discussion of how policymakers reacted in the main countries to the threat of a second Great Depression in 2008 and 2009. They pursued a policy which, by the way, I advocated with other people, called quantitative easing, which was large-scale money creation by the state, which is, of course, what wasn't done between 1929 and 1933 by the Federal Reserve in America. And that quantitative easing did go a long way to stopping a second Great Depression in 2008, after 2008 and 2009. It's a pleasure to have given this introduction. I strongly commend the course to you. Thank you.